I'm pretty sure no one expected the events of Resident Evil 8 to take place. It is a very interesting entry in the overall Resident Evil franchise, and I happen to be a major fan of it. However, no one can blame you if you missed out on a few key details in your first playthrough, or if you simply had no clue what was going on. This is a game fit with werewolves, vampires, and metal benders. That's why I'm here to explain the full story of Resident Evil 8 Village. Our story takes place as early as the 1900s. A woman named Miranda lost her daughter, Ava, to the Spanish flu. Stricken with grief, she wanders into a cave to die when she makes a major discovery. She comes across the Megamycetes, an infection capable of many things. Once she touches it, she gains vast knowledge and learns that those infected with the Megamycetes has their consciousness stored within it. And if she were to find the right vessel, she could store her daughter's consciousness into that person. Think of the Megamycetes as a cloud storage, and think of the perfect vessel as a hard drive. She also discovers the Claudu, a parasite that is also capable of gifting worthy candidates with insane powers. She infects herself and becomes a powerful being while also picking up the power of mimicry. She can shapeshift into anyone she chooses. It doesn't take long before she becomes the ruler of the village above the cave, and she uses it for her own personal experiments in an effort to find the perfect vessel. During her research, she meets a dying man by the name of Oswald E. Spencer, who becomes a student of hers. Inspired by Miranda's research, Spencer goes on to find the next step in human evolution via a virus. He comes across a plant in Africa carrying the progenitor virus, and what happens next is a pretty long story. A story that would take about 8 games to tell. Back to Miranda, the villagers begin worshipping her like a god, and she adopts several test subjects, kids, to test the Claudu. The first is Lady Dimitrescu, a descendant in the Dimitrescu royalty family. The Claudu gives her insane regenerative abilities, which leads to her growing exponentially in size. She's also able to grow her nails into razor-sharp claws if provoked. However, she has several defects. For example, she constantly needs to feed on flesh and blood in order to balance her regenerative abilities, and failing to do so will lead to her mutating uncontrollably. The second child is Moreau, who was a massive failure to say the least. His intelligence decreased significantly, and the Claudu mutated his organs to resemble fish-like gills and a swim bladder. He can also mutate uncontrollably into a giant fish which he can't control. The third is Mistress Donna, a lonely child with a mental illness who only ever had her doll for company. The Claudu allowed her to use plants infected by the Megamycetes to give her victims hallucinations. However, her unstable mindset caused her to divide her power amongst her dolls so she can control them from a short distance. And finally, there's Heisenberg. The Claudu turned his internal organs into electric organs similar to that of an electric ray, and it's connected to his nervous system. This grants him control over the electromagnetic field around him, and he can manipulate metal to his will. While Heisenberg showed great promise, all of these experiments weren't plausible vessels for a newly reborn Ava. However, Miranda kept these children around and gave them power over the village and referred to them as her children, effectively making them all unofficial siblings. Lady Dimitrescu sees her other siblings as inferior to her and wants to be treated special by Miranda. Maru has a deep love for his mother and is obsessed with proving his worth to her to make her proud of him. As far as I can tell, Donna is indifferent to her new family, unlike Heisenberg, who hates his siblings and especially Mother Miranda for turning him into a freak. Lady Dimitrescu resides in her castle where she can perform experiments and feast on anyone unfortunate enough to find her in her grasp. Her experiments led to her infecting 3 worthy candidates of the Claudu. The girls had their bodies consumed by common flies who eventually reshaped themselves to resemble that of a human body. Lady Dimitrescu learned by opening a window that the code petrifies the flies, meaning they can't go outside the castle or be exposed to open windows. Lady Dimitrescu felt a mother-daughter bond with the 3 girls, and she took them in as her own, naming them Bella, Danelia, and Cassandra. The 3 girls had a craving for human blood much like their mother, and they all feasted on unfortunate villagers sent to the castle. The hired maidens also feared for their lives, since making the tiniest mistake will have you sent to the cellar where all of your blood is sucked dried and used for wine, making you to a walking mindless husk of a person. As for Moreau, he was tasked by Mother Miranda to find a suitable vessel for Ava. He tried experimenting with the Claudu on villagers sent to him, but their heads would usually explode. After multiple bloody failures, he tried infecting them with the Chaldeu like usual, but also injected wolf blood into their spine, and this accidentally created savage, wolf-like beings referred to as Lycans. Maru would also reside in a lake once he mutated into his fish form and would sometimes feed on local fishermen. As for Donna, she resided in the outskirts of the village with her dolls and would usually test her hallucinatory capabilities on unfortunate villagers. Heisenberg resided in his factory where he would begin to create a metal army with the dream of one day overthrowing Mother Miranda. One day, Miranda is approached by a corporation to have some of the research in which they promised they would help her get her daughter back. She accepted the offer, but the corporation created another defect named Evelyn. The bioweapon was being shipped across the ocean with a woman named Mia Winters playing the part of her mother to keep her calm. That doesn't work too well, however, and Evelyn kills everyone on board except Mia, and the ship crashes during a severe storm in Louisiana. Jack Baker shows up to the ship's wreckage and he takes Mia and Evelyn into his home. However, Evelyn wakes up and quickly infects the family, turning them into regenerative, insane psychopaths who believe they are part of Evelyn's family. This would go on to be known as the Baker Incident. Ethan Winters then receives a distress call from his wife and he heads to Louisiana to find her. He eventually finds her in a cell, but he quickly learns something isn't right once she attacks him. After surviving his infected wife, he is then attacked by Jack, who proceeds to kill him. However, he is infected with the Megamyces and his entire body is now composed of mold. But this goes unknown to Ethan and everyone involved. After surviving the insane Bakers, he cures Mia, destroys Evelyn, and the two are rescued by Chris Redfield, a former BSAA agent who knows full well the power of BOWs. The two are moved to Europe by Chris, and Ethan is given military training in case such an event was to happen again, and the Baker incident was covered up and a gas leak was used as a cover story. The two lovers try to move past the incident, but Ethan still feels like a part of him is forever stuck to that house, and Mia tries her best to forget anything ever happened, but fails to do so. Eventually the two get pregnant and they have a child named Rose. Rose is tested by the BSAA and is shown to be in good health. However, Mia eventually finds out the truth about Ethan and also learns that Rose is not a normal child, to say the least. Mother Miranda learns of Rose through the disaster caused by her research, and she instantly knows that the child would be a perfect vessel for Ava. What she doesn't know is Chris Redfield has his team doing recon on her, and they learn of her plan to capture Mia, shapeshift into her place, infiltrate the Winters' home, and take Rose. Miranda captures Mia and uses her for experiments, however, she still needs Ethan to complete her research since his body is truly remarkable. But she is intercepted by Chris Redfield and is sprayed by gunfire. Thinking quickly, she mimics a corpse and Chris walks into the home and paranoid that Ethan was infected by Miranda, he has him and Rose forcefully transferred to Site C. Chris doesn't tell Ethan about Miranda or her plans since he fears he'd want to get involved and having a civilian in the way would complicate things. However, during the transfer, Miranda wakes up and kills everyone in the vehicle, sparing Ethan since he's a further use to her. She takes Rose with her and leaves. Back at the village, Eugen is asked to give Miranda some tools and he witnesses firsthand as she and her children crystallize Rose and chops her into several pieces which are then reserved in flasks, with each one given to a house lord. This is to test Rose's regenerative abilities. Things have also gone out of hand and the peaceful town is ravaged by hordes of Lycans. A woman named Louisa turns her house into a refuge for any remaining survivors to stay and her husband goes to get help. A father named Leonardo makes his way to Eugen's house to investigate a scream when he is attacked and scratched by a Lycan. Him and his daughter Elena try to make it to Louisa's house but have to stay at a shack right outside since they can't get the gate open and no one is answering. Meanwhile, Louisa's husband is wounded and cornered by a giant wolf and he bleeds out while it stalks him outside. Back to Ethan, he wakes up and sees the crash. He pushes himself forward and finds himself in the village. He comes across a fear-stricken survivor who hands him a gun for safety but is then dragged and killed by a Lycan. Ethan has the chance to see one face to face and has two of his fingers bitten off by the ferocious beast. He fights off the Lycan and survives her onslaught, but right as he's cornered, Mother Miranda calls them off with a bell since she's still curious to learn more about Ethan. He comes across Miranda who takes the form of an old woman and he learns that Rose is here. After further exploration, he meets Leonardo and Elena and helps them into Luisa's house, but after succumbing to the lichen infection, Leonardo turns into a lichen and kills the remaining survivors, with Elena perishing in a fire shortly after. The emotionally distraught Ethan makes his way to the castle, but on his way he encounters Heisenberg, who encases him in metal and brings him to Mother Miranda during a family meeting. Heisenberg and Lady Dimitrescu argue over what to do with the foreigner, and Miranda allows Heisenberg to put Ethan in his games. After surviving another onslaught of lichens and a meat grinder, Ethan heads to the castle but is captured once again by Lady Dimitrescu's daughters. He escapes and fights his way to the castle, solving puzzles, fighting off blood-drained maidens, and of course the bloodthirsty daughters. After killing one of the girls, Lady Dimitrescu is enraged and vows to kill Ethan herself. The determined father finds out Rose is not in fact in the castle, and he kills the other two daughters and solves the remaining puzzles while being pursued by Lady Dimitrescu. He eventually finds a dagger coated in poisons all across the world, which was used against demons and monsters, and fittingly enough, he uses it against the furious mother, upsetting her regenerative balance and making her mutate violently. He kills her and finds a mysterious flask which he learns from the Duke is the head of his little girl. Ethan learns that if he wants to save his daughter, he needs to find the other parts of her body and place them in the altar. He takes down Donna and retrieves Rose's legs, and retrieves her arms from Moreau, but not before the crazed lunatic steals off his exit. Ethan comes in contact with Chris Redfield and his squad, and still upset over Mia, he scolds the tired soldier. But before anything can escalate further, Moreau attacks in his fish form, unable to hold it back any longer, and Ethan kills him and escapes. He is then contacted by Heisenberg to test him further by allowing him to take his piece of Rose, which is hidden in the den of the lichens. While this happens, Heisenberg realizes that him and Ethan can make an alliance against Miranda and uses Rose's power to destroy her. Once Ethan makes it to his factory, he refuses the offer and Heisenberg leaves him to die by his failed mechanical experiments, including a mindless creature for turbo engine attached. Ethan escapes and fights his way to the factory, encountering Heisenberg once more, who uses the surrounding metal to form a giant impenetrable body. As he prepares his assault against Miranda, Ethan encounters Chris once again, who finally tells him everything that happened since he's now knee-deep in the situation already. Chris goes to ready his squad as Ethan gets in a mech-like creation Heisenberg created using a metal composite he can't control. Heisenberg comes across Ethan and the two fight it off, with the determined father emerging as the victor. However, since Ethan has slain all Miranda's false children and no longer is a mystery to the mad woman, she rips out his heart. Chris finds out about this and determined to make things right and finally put this Megamycete situation in the ground, him and his squad sweep through the village fighting off waves of lichens. Chris finds the source of the Megamycetes and places a bomb on it capable of blowing the village sky high, and afterwards he finds Mia, who tells him the truth about Ethan. Speaking of which, Ethan wakes up and is in the mental space, which is the shared consciousness between all infected individuals of the Megamycetes, and Evelyn reveals to him that he is dead. Still determined to save his daughter, Ethan revives himself and makes it to Miranda, who realizes that her experiment with Rose has ultimately failed. Ethan kills her with the brief assistance of Chris, and the two try to make it out. However, Ethan can no longer sustain his body, and he leaves his daughter in the hands of Chris and stays behind so his family can make it out safe. He blows up the village himself, ending the evil of the Megamycetes. Mia learns of her husband's death and grieves, while Chris finds out that the BSAA sent bioweapons to the village. The last we see of Rose is several years later, where she honors her father and is watched closely. And that is the Resident Evil 8 story fully summarized. I have a review of this game in the works, but I'll just go ahead and say that this is an absolutely incredible story that blew my mind. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Hey guys, thank you so much for reaching the end of this video. Real quick, I just want to shout out my Wattpad account. For those of you into reading, I'm working on an entire catalog of novels, some of which are fanfictions of existing stories I'm super passionate about, like Resident Evil in the DC universe. If you would be so kind as to check it out and maybe read what I currently have on there, your support would be more than appreciated. With all that said, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.